This is VOA News. Reporting by remote, I'm Joe Ramsey. President Vladimir Putin said Russian strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure and a decision to freeze participation in a Black Sea grain export program were responses to a drone attack on Moscow's fleet in Crimea he blamed on Ukraine. Putin told the news conference on Monday Ukrainian drones had used the same marine corridors grain ships transited under the UN-brokered deal. Kyiv has not claimed responsibility for the attack and denies using the grain program's security corridor for military purposes. Meanwhile, on the 250th day of a war that has ground on since Russia's invasion of Ukraine since February 24th, Russian missiles rained down across the country. Ukrainian officials said energy infrastructure, including hydroelectric dams, was hit, knocking out power, heat, and water supplies. People have gathered near the site of the weekend's deadly crowd surge in Seoul to pay their respects to the more than 150 people who lost their lives in the country's worst disaster in years, AP correspondent Charles De Ledesma reports.
Citizens lay flowers and placed drinks near the Itaewon metro station. Saturday's crowd surge was concentrated in a sloped, narrow alley close by. Witnesses and survivors recalled a hell-like chaos. Student Lee Jun-sung says he had come to pay his respects in the hope that people's consciousness has improved and to express condolences to the victims who must have felt wronged by the accident. President Yoon had on Sunday declared a one-week national mourning period and ordered flags at government buildings and public offices to fly at half-staff. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
This is VOA News. Charges have been filed against the man who broke into U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's California home Friday, and police say his goal was to hold her hostage. AP Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani reports.
Court papers say David DePape found a sleeping Paul Pelosi in a bedroom before he beat the 82-year-old in the head with a hammer. The affidavit reveals DePape told police he wanted to talk with Nancy Pelosi. If she lied, he would break her kneecaps. They say he explained she would then have to be wheeled into Congress, which would show other lawmakers there are consequences to actions. Nancy Pelosi was here in Washington at the time. DePape now faces federal charges of attempted kidnapping of a U.S. official and retaliating against a federal official by injuring a family member. Sagar Meghani, Washington.
With some help from Twitter's new owner, misinformation about the grievous attack on U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband is surging online. Authorities say the suspect in the attack has told police he was targeting the House Speaker, and there's no reason to believe he knew her husband before he broke into their home Friday. Yet that hasn't stopped bizarre conspiracy theories from spreading. Elon Musk, the new owner of Twitter, amplified one conspiracy theory claiming Paul Pelosi knew his attacker. Musk later deleted his tweet. Prominent Republicans, including Donald Trump Jr. and Marjorie Taylor Greene, have also spread the unfounded claim. Britain's Interior Minister is defending the government's treatment of newly arrived migrants after critics blamed her for the quote-unquote wretched condition endured by thousands of people at an overcrowded center for asylum seekers. Hundreds of people who had crossed the English Channel in small boats have been moved to a former airfield in southeast Britain after another processing center was hit by gasoline bombs on Sunday. There already were 3,000 people at the facility, which is intended to hold about half the number. Somalia's health minister says the death toll from a pair of car bombings in the capital 2 days ago has reached 120 and could rise further because some people are still missing. The minister said Monday more than 320 others were wounded in Saturday's explosions at a busy junction in Mogadishu, and over 150 of them are still being treated at hospitals. It was Somalia's deadliest attack since a truck bombing at the same spot killed more than 500 people 5 years ago. The Al-Qaeda affiliate Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility. Find more at voanews.com. Reporting by remote, I'm Joe Ramsey, VOA News. This is VOA News, reporting by remote. I'm Joe Ramsey. Brazil's president is still not conceding the election he lost to his leftist rival, the former president. AP correspondent Ben Thomas reports.
Jair Bolsonaro spoke publicly Tuesday for the first time since results of the presidential election were announced. But he didn't mention those results, which showed Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva winning with 50.9% of the vote to Bolsonaro's 49.1%. Bolsonaro did say he will follow the rules laid out in the nation's constitution, and his chief of staff told reporters he'd been authorized to begin the transition process. Bolsonaro has repeatedly questioned the reliability of Brazil's electoral system, and his 2 days of silence prompted demonstrations by supporters, including truck drivers who blocked roads with burning tires and their big rigs. I'm Ben Thomas.
Exit polls in Israel indicate former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his allies may have won enough seats to return to power in a nationalist and religious government after 3.5 years of political gridlock. It was Israel's fifth national election since 2019. Tuesday's vote was once again a referendum on Netanyahu and his fitness to serve amid corruption charges. Saudi Arabia has shared intelligence with American officials that suggests Iran could be preparing for an imminent attack on the kingdom. That's according to 3 U.S. officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity. One of the officials who confirmed the intelligence sharing describes it as a credible threat of an attack, quote, soon or within 48 hours. Find more on these stories on our website, voanews.com, or follow us on the VOA mobile app. This is VOA News. Ships loaded with grain have departed Ukraine despite Russia suspending its participation in a UN-brokered deal that ensures safe wartime passage of critical food supplies. But the United Nations said vessels wouldn't move Wednesday, raising concerns about future shipments. Analysts say Russia is likely using its withdrawal as a bargaining chip to get what it wants from the deal, such as easing the way for its fertilizer exports. The U.S. Treasury Department has announced sanctions against a weapons trafficking network affiliated with the Islamic State group in Somalia and the al-Qaeda-linked al-Shabaab extremist group, which are accused of carrying out deadly terrorist attacks on civilians, including car bombings.
The designations from the Treasury Department today aim to expose and disrupt a broad network of weapons traffickers, their associates, and an affiliated business operating primarily between Yemen and Somalia.
White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby, as the move to freeze and block potential transactions with U.S. entities comes after 2 car bombings at a busy junction in Somalia's capital killed at least 120 people on Saturday. Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility. The man accused of attacking the husband of U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is being held without bail, AP correspondent Norman Hall reports.
A San Francisco judge has ordered that the man accused of breaking into House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's home, beating her husband, and seeking to kidnap her be held without bail. David DePape was also appointed representation. Public Defender Adam Lipscomb was asked if his defense will include misinformation and conspiracy theories that may have impacted his client.
That's certainly something that we're going to look into, that we're going to delve into as his defense team. But again, it would be premature to talk about that at this time.
The defense will also review his client's mental state. I'm Norman Hall.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said lessons must be learned as he visited the site of a bridge collapse that killed 135 people and met some of the injured in a hospital on Tuesday. Army, Navy, and National Disaster Response Force teams continued their search while locals gathered on the banks of a river in Modi's home state in western India. The colonial-era suspension footbridge was packed with sightseers when it gave way on Sunday evening, sending people plunging about 10 meters into the water. In the capital, New Delhi, dozens of protesters demanded the resignation of the state chief and called for more compensation. Find more at voanews.com or on the VOA mobile app. Reporting by remote, I'm Joe Ramsey. This is VOA News, reporting by remote. I'm Joe Ramsey. Some of Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro supporters are asking the military to help keep him in office despite his election loss to leftist rival Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Thousands of people who backed the far-right president gathered Wednesday outside one of the Army's 8 regional headquarters a day after Bolsonaro stopped short of conceding the election, but authorized his chief of staff to begin the transition process. The demonstrations come as truckers who support Bolsonaro maintain hundreds of roadblocks across the country to protest his loss. Ethiopia's warring sides have formally agreed during talks in South Africa to a permanent cessation of hostilities in the 2-year conflict, whose victims could be counted in the hundreds of thousands. Enormous challenges lie ahead, include getting all parties to lay down arms or withdrawal.
Two parties in the Ethiopian conflict have formally agreed to the cessation of hostilities, as well as to systematic, orderly, smooth, and coordinated disarmament.
The war, which marks 2 years on Friday, saw abuses documented on either side. Kenya's President William Ruto on Wednesday officially deployed troops to Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo to join an East African regional force aiming to end decades of bloodshed. The 7 countries of the East African Community, which Congo joined this year, agreed in April to set up a joint force to fight militia groups in Congo's east. This is VOA News. The UN Security Council has overwhelmingly rejected Russia's attempts to establish a commission to investigate its unfounded claims that Ukraine and the United States are carrying out quote-unquote military biological activities that violate the convention prohibiting the use of biological weapons. Russia only got support from China in the vote, with the U.S., Britain, and France opposing the Russian resolution and the 10 other council nations abstaining. The vote reflected the council's continuing opposition and skepticism about Russia's actions since its February 24th invasion of Ukraine. The White House has accused North Korea of covertly shipping a, quote, significant number of artillery shells to Russia in support of its invasion of Ukraine.
Our information indicates that they're trying to obscure the method of supply by funneling them through other countries in the Middle East and North Africa.
White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said Wednesday North Korea is trying to secretly supply the ammunition to Russia, but the U.S. is monitoring to determine whether the shipments are actually received. Air raid sirens sounded on a South Korean island, and residents evacuated to underground shelters after North Korea fired more than 20 missiles Wednesday, at least one of them in its direction and landing near the rival's tense sea border. South Korea quickly responded by launching its own missiles in the same border area. The launches came hours after North Korea threatened to use nuclear weapons in protest of ongoing South Korean U.S. military drills that it views as an invasion rehearsal. The U.S. Federal Reserve is again raising its key rate to fight inflation. AP correspondent Ben Thomas reports.
We are moving our policy stance purposefully to a level that will be sufficiently restrictive to return inflation to 2%.
It's the 4th straight hike of 75 basis points, but Fed Chair Jerome Powell says there's still some way to go to fully tame inflation.
And incoming data since our last meeting suggests that the ultimate level of interest rates will be higher than previously expected.
Powell says the time is coming when the Fed might slow the pace, but
there's no sense that inflation is coming down.
And as for those increases,
it's premature to discuss pausing.
Ben Thomas, Washington.
Find more on these stories and the rest of the day's news on our website, voanews.com. Or for the latest news, follow us on the VOA mobile app. Reporting by remote, I'm Joe Ramsey.